Deans, come take your seats. You know, I'm looking for the collective noun to describe deans, you know, pride of lions, murder of crows. I think it's, I don't know, everybody's got to think about that together, but a cohort, a brigade. Thank you so much for your participation, and let's just dive in as we look at the academic insights into access to justice. Dean Alexandra, would you get us started?
Sure. Hi, everybody. This has been an inspiring program, and I'd like to thank our wonderful stalwart of providing access to justice, the Legal Services Corporation, and of course, Dean Osofsky for hosting. And thank you, Professor Meno. I have to tell you that no matter how old you get, you will never call your professor by any other name than professor. So I wanted to kind of start with two framing with this conversation. One is that law schools are essential and a bridge to the legal profession, and that we're all in this together. So every generation is called to meet a moment every time, and we are indebted to all the work all of the generations have done before us. And at this moment, our fates are tied together. And so I was brought to remember this today as I looked at my professor, who, when I saw her, and I shared this with her today, and I've told this story many times, but not with Professor Meno present. My first year, we had a big plenary to expose us to legal careers. And Professor Meno was one of the folks, professors who talked to us about what we could be and to not scare us into all the debt we could go into. And I looked at Professor Meno, and I said, this is who I could be. And I have remembered her career, and when she became dean, I did a dance in my office and said, yes, someone committed to justice just became a dean. And so when I think about that, and I think about someone we often quote, which is Charles Hamilton Houston, right, and the model that he brought together for us on how to do access to justice, and Justice Marshall, and we all know that quote, right? A lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite to society, and that seems harsh. But we do believe that lawyers save lives. And what does that mean for the work that we do? Lawyers and law schools provide, one, entry to the profession. Second, law schools are essential in comprehensive education and training, so ensure the licensing and the provision of quality services to the communities that need it the most. Third, we are engine and engineers of pipelining. We are the vehicles to next generations of lawyers. And fourth, we are called to remember this. We model what it is to provide justice and what it is to be comprehensive vetters of what is the rule of law. And so at our law school and throughout these colleagues with whom I work very closely, we are busy trying to expand that entry with your help. We also are busy trying to disseminate this idea of the provision of quality services, not only to our clinics, which are essential, but to really trying to figure out what a holistic provision of services should look like. So I think today we think about, hey, we can't do it all by ourselves, right? So what does it mean to serve the poor when poor people, when they come to us, also have eviction issues, also have their bank accounts that they can't access. In fact, they can't even write a check because they can't get a bank account. Also have medical conditions that have to be attended to before they can even petition to social services to get what's owed to them. And that holistic model is motivating us in law schools so that we are not only working with our students and the lawyers, but also are working with social workers, are working with medical practitioners, and all of them are now starting to be embedded in our clinics. So this idea that our students are coming into the profession knowing, and if you've talked to us, you've heard that our students, this generation of students, have more clarity about what they want to do than any other generation before. And I feel like I can say this after 25 years because I've seen many of them and I know how I was, and it took Professor Meno to give me some clarity. They already know, and they know they want to serve the poor. But as you heard with the statistics, there are more poor people to serve than there are lawyers accessible to them. So we are that bridge, and we welcome this conversation.
That's beautiful, and your energy after multiple deaning is really remarkable. So Dean Booth.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. Thank you for inviting us to come and talk about not just what our law schools are doing, but so that you could hear the passion for what we do. I know everybody on this panel, and we don't do this just because it's a job. We feel it's a calling, and there's a particular reason why we do the interesting work, interesting, good word, that we do every day. When we think about access to justice, a lot of times students will think about individuals having access to the court, but really access to justice even starts before that, right? If we truly believe in protecting individuals' human rights, we're thinking about, do they even have access to legal advice? There is a significant portion, I think I read some statistics that said 80% of individuals who live in poverty, their legal needs go unmet. And a lot of times it's because they don't know that they have rights that need to be protected. One of the things that I think is critically important for us, and we kind of share this view as law school deans, is even though there is a standard that now says that we need to assist students with their professional identity development, it's something that we truly believe. That the law school is a haven and a place where they are developing who they want to be as a professional. And it underscores something that Justice Thie said, that she quoted Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg in this privilege, right, that students have, that all of us have who have a law degree. The ability to go to law school, I tell them all the time, you come here, you feel like you're in this small world and everybody you see is a prospective lawyer or a lawyer, and this is the world. This is not the world. There is a large world outside there that needs your services and needs the education that you are getting. So when you have that privilege to have that Juris Doctorate, it's important for us as deans to make sure we instill in the students that that privilege comes with a strong obligation and a strong responsibility, not just to the profession, but to the heart of the profession. The heart of the legal profession is service. It's critically important for us in the law schools to make sure that we're assisting students in that professional development. And if it means that at the heart of the profession it is service, what does that mean? Yes, some of them want to come to law school to make the big bucks and have, an elaborate lifestyle. You can still do that if you want to, but you're still in a profession that you chose to become a member of, and you still have an obligation to serve in some capacity. Whether you do it as your regular 9 to 5 or 7 to 7, as our schedules usually are, or you do it pro bono as your pro bono work, it's an obligation that you have to have the privilege that you have been given to come to law school and get the degree. And when we think about this obligation, the obligation is not just to serve, but it's to make sure that there is equal, meaningful legal advice and legal service to everyone. Right? If you truly believe the profession is one of service, it is a profession of service to the community, not just your personal community, but the community at large. And so it's critically important in law schools and as law school deans, we take that job very seriously in making sure that students understand the privilege that they have and understand the obligation and the responsibilities that come with that privilege to make sure that they, in some way, do something to close that gap that we have with the access to justice.
It's very powerful. Thank you. Dean Krug.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Meno, and I'm just so happy to be here. It's an honor to participate in this wonderful event, and I just wanted to provide a few thoughts about my perspective on access to justice. And to me, fundamentally, access to justice helps people achieve human dignity. And I think the project that law schools, I think all of our law schools have taken on to prepare our students as Dean Booth points out, to service is absolutely critical. There are so many people out there, and I just think, you know, human dignity, what does that really mean? Well, of course, some people can't afford, can't afford legal representation. And, or they're, you know, sometimes navigating the system. It's such a maze out there. And a lawyer is critical in providing that necessary help so that people can get away from the harms that are confronting them, or alleviate themselves of a tremendous debt burden that is impacting their entire lives and everything they do, or anything else that is simply hindering their ability to be productive contributors to society. And I think it's just tremendously important that law schools do take on the project, to instilling in our students the importance of whatever we do, however, you know, profit-generating our careers might be, that there is always room for that, again, service, that help for other people. And simply because, you know, clinics have been emphasized so far, although I hope to talk about various other things, you know, we have a very unique clinic model. I think it's actually the only one in this country that has a fee-generating model, and meaning that most of our clinicians who are excellent teachers still pursue legal practices in which, you know, generally it's fee-generating. However, you know, even in such a model, and it's really a wonderful model because it allows students to actually work in a law firm setting while they're pursuing their clinic work, we have pro bono obligations. And it's incumbent upon all of our clinical faculty to make a commitment to providing substantial, and I mean substantial, pro bono work to clients throughout the year. And this directly, as I've been mentioning, the ability of individuals to access justice while at the same time inculcating in our students that professional and moral obligation to continue doing this work throughout their careers. And so I'll stop with that, but as with my colleagues' law schools, it's of critical importance, and I think we all take it incredibly seriously.
Well, it's really powerful, and you remind me of something that I quoted Thurgood Marshall before. He once said, in recognizing the humanity of our fellow beings, we pay the highest tribute to ourselves. So it's about dignity for all of us. Dean Miles.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's a real privilege to be here. When I think about what we try to impart to our students about values and about access to justice and the importance of this issue, you know, I have the great privilege of being at the law school that Edward Levy taught at, and so we have his example to inspire all of our students. And I'll just say on a personal note, while I never had the opportunity to meet him personally, every day I go into the office that he used to occupy. And my colleagues are quick to remind me about every decadal decision, whether big or small. Is this what Dean Levy would have done? I now happily have a colleague also who used to teach at Duke who reminds me, is this what Dean David Levy would have done? But seriously, it is a really powerful example for our students, and it is a great powerful example also for our graduates. Not a week goes by when I don't meet a graduate who wants to talk to me about the experience they had at the law school and the example that Edward Levy was to them. And so today, when we talk to our students about access to justice, there's a number of things, whether they learn it in a clinic or whether they learn it in another course, that's really important for students to appreciate and that we try to impart to them. And on one, it's almost, at a certain level, obvious, but it's easy to forget that access to legal services really matters. And it matters, obviously, for the outcome of the case, but as we've heard in the earlier panels, it makes a very practical and human difference as to whether or not someone is, for example, going to be able to obtain the legal benefits to which they may be entitled. That's really powerful. And I think so many, as we heard earlier, so many of the students who go to law school because they want to make a difference. And that's a very fundamental way in which they can make a difference. And then I think if we kind of step back and look more broadly, one of the things where access to legal services can make a huge difference is in the client's overall life course. Is someone able to maintain their employment if they're not able to maintain their housing? Or can they maintain their education and continue with their education if they lose their health services? Those kinds of things, I think, are really important for our students to understand and can be taught and learned in clinics, but can be taught and learned elsewhere in the curriculum as well. And I think the other important aspects that we try to impart to our students are, of course, concepts of fairness, about is it really fair if one party is represented and the other isn't. Also, really questions of accuracy about the courts. Are courts going to get the legal decision right when there's this lopsided feature about representation? So the integrity of the court's outcomes matter a lot as well. And then, as we heard the Chief Justice mention, and I think it's very important for us, particularly at this moment in time, to think about what does it mean about faith in our institutions and faith in our government, particularly in our courts. I think one of the really shocking findings of the Access to Justice report was about the response about whether or not the respondents believe that the courts could do justice for them. And I think that is crucially important for all of us and something that we should all, I think we do, and talk about and impart to our students.
Thank you so much. Dean Azofsky, thank you for hosting us. Your turn.
Thank you so much, Professor Minow. And before I answer the question, I just wanted to say how honored Northwestern Pritzker Law is to host the Legal Services Corporation 50th anniversary celebration here, and to thank you and the MacArthur Foundation for your sponsorship of it, John Levy and Ron Flagg for their leadership, and of course LSC and the law school teams for all their wonderful work organizing this event. And really, just to thank you to everyone in the room for the work that each and every one of you is doing to advance access to justice. So I just wanted to say on behalf of Northwestern, happy 50th to LSC. We could not be more grateful for 50 years of critically needed service. You know, my colleagues just talked about a lot of different ways that access to justice matters, and I sort of want to plus one every single one of them. You know, I think that, you know, we as lawyers, as legal professionals, as law schools, we have an obligation to advance greater justice. And more equal representation is just a crucial part of greater justice, right? If people come in to legal situations unequally represented, there's no way that we can get to the level of justice that we need. It's just utterly unacceptable that 92% of low-income people receive no or inadequate access to legal services. And, you know, and as we know, Gideon has not fulfilled its promise on the criminal side, as we've already been hearing about today, right? So here at Northwestern, I talk a lot about how we don't just have opportunities at this law school, but we have responsibilities. And when we think about those responsibilities, and we talk about them from orientation all the way to graduation and beyond, and of course, you know, the work of so many of our alumni, some of whom we've heard from today, and I'll highlight again later. I'm looking at you, Kate Shake, and of course we heard from the governor this morning. And of course I can't think about our alumni without thinking about your father, who's made such incredible contributions to society through a lifetime of public service in so many different ways. And you know, as Professor Minow knows, at orientation this past year, I actually was asked for an example of an alum who's been engaged in public service and was talking about the tremendous contributions of Newt Minow. But I wanted to just very briefly talk concretely about 7 ways I think law schools, and I promise I'll be super fast. I'll just like a sentence or 2 on each, but I just want to highlight, because I've been hearing in my colleagues' remarks each of these 7 ways, right? So the first, of course, is through clinical legal education. We are so proud of the Bloom Legal Clinic, which over 90% of our students work in different ways, and I have all sorts of different examples that I won't give right now of the ways that the Bloom Legal Clinic has critically served access to justice, obviously highlighted at the beginning, the CWC's work, the Center for Wrongful Convictions and Exoneration work, but there's so many different ways that our clinic's involved. I also think the second way that law schools play a critical role in advancing access to justice is around the work that we do to support our public interest students and their pro bono work in law school and pro bono work among our alumni community. I hope when we get to innovation, we'll get a little bit more of a chance to talk about that, because I think that we have opportunities to expand our partnerships. In this moment right now, with all of these people in the room and these deans sitting here, I think thinking about how we expand those partnerships is critically important. The third thing that's come up today, but that I think law schools, because of the interdisciplinary partnerships we can form across our universities, and I can give examples from our law school of this, and I'm sure we all can, is in technology innovation, right? We need to think critically about the role, both the promise and the limitations of the ways in which emerging technology can help expand access to legal services. The fourth way that law schools can play a role is around legal reform. And our clinics certainly play a role there, but we also have professors at our law schools and others who are deeply involved in this question of when should we allow a greater role for professionals who don't necessarily have a JD to help with access to justice, right? A fifth piece, and this is building on some of what Tom was saying, is this idea of educating students across the curriculum. Right? So it's not just about the work that they're doing in their pro bono work or in their clinics, but in every class we have a moment in which we can think about justice and these questions of access to justice. How is that occurring? The sixth is about research, right? We're all research institutions. And there are a number of people in this room, and LSC has contributed to critical research on access to justice to allow for data-driven approaches to bridge the gap. And I think that's going to be a crucial part that law schools can play in all of this. And then finally, 7, see, I told you, very quick on each. I think we have to talk about access to legal education. Before the JD study makes it clear that 50% of people or more are deciding before college whether they're going to go to law school. Those tend to be very privileged people. So how do we bridge that gap? And particularly, how do we bridge that gap when we're all committed to following the law post-SFFA, but we also haven't changed our basic values about what's important, right? And so how do we build legally permissible pipeline programs that help, whether it's in CPS, right, which is something we've been expanding for first-generation students, et cetera, to make sure that we are broadening who has access to legal education, which is a crucial piece of getting to the access to justice. So,
Wow. 7. It's impressive. Dean Rosado Pereira. That is a hard. Maybe, is it working?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that is a hard act to follow, Hari, and I was worried a little bit being at the tail end that I would have nothing to add, but I'm going to add just a little bit of shape and kind of pull back a little bit, and I love what my colleagues are saying. I'm so glad to be part of this panel. Is I think that for law schools, it's not about what we offer, it's also shaping hearts and minds throughout the experience to create a culture of service and the development of servant leaders. And as everybody said, it doesn't, and it's not just for the 20 or 25% of our students that plan to and intend to go into public service or public interest law afterwards. It's for everyone. I have always been a real proponent of every lawyer has a role to play, and we begin in law school. We begin on day one, and then that culture and that ethos follows. And I want to pull back a little bit because I don't want to forget about that we all have value-based institutions, that law schools are not just, grinding lawyers out. We come with mission and values. So for example, at DePaul and many of the schools across the stage have values that are about service, that are about justice. We talk about our St. Vinny and how he asked us all, what must be done? What must be done? And we ask that question from day one. And even in orientation, and even when I'm recruiting law students, I talk talk about the reason why you want to come to DePaul, like many law schools, is because you will be able to serve and you will be able to have purpose. And we talk about our mission at the law school, and many of you have the same mission, which is to increase access to the legal system for the most vulnerable and uphold the dignity of all persons. So bringing in all of those themes. So we begin from day one. One of the things that we do, again, trying to, from orientation, as you said, we have professional identity. One of the things that we do, and many of our colleagues do this now too, is we have a 1L service day, where every single one of our first-year students go out into the city of Chicago and they do something that feels purposeful. And that's the beginning. That's the beginning of that feeling a part of Chicago, feeling a part of this community. And I think that's really super important. And I think what's also important is for us to model. I think it's not enough for the students to go out there and for them to be in the clinics, but for us to be out there in the community with them, faculty, staff, other students, upper class students, and our alumni, which we engage in a lot of our projects at the law school. But I will say, because I'm always practical, and I always want to say the other side, is that I'm not sure we have been very good. I think we chew at the edges really, really well, and we all are trying very hard. I do think we do have to continue to face the structural inequities in the system, and I think we try to do that, but that's going to be a full-on collaboration. I know the CLEAR Commission and others are working at trying to get at those core and root issues, and we law schools will be a part of that as well, because we need to do better altogether.
Excellent, and the ALI project is a very good example of that. Judge Dean Davidson, thank you for being here, and it's hard to be the last here, but I promise I'll come to you early in our second question. Give it a try, yeah.
Thank you all for allowing the downstate dean to join the Chicago deans. So I was in town today, so I was here listening, so I appreciate the opportunity to share with you. Our institution is one that was actually founded by the legislature in the public interest to serve the public good. And so at the forefront of all that we do, we stay true to that mission. And the founding dean, Hiram Lazar, was from Southern Illinois. And he came to Southern Illinois as the founding dean because he recognized that there was a need for access to justice in that area. So often when we think about the state of Illinois, we think Chicago, and we forget about the rest of the state. And the region in which we serve, there are so many legal deserts. And so not only are we training our students to think about access to justice and providing for the community post-graduation, they are hands-on while they are in school. Our clinics do serve the 16 most southernmost counties in the state, and in several of those counties there are 1 to 2 attorneys, and a few there are no attorneys. And it's so important, as my colleagues have stated along the way, that there are so many situations when we think about humanity and issues that folks have. If they had someone to talk to, so many of those issues could be prevented. And so I want to shout out to the Supreme Court Commission on Professionalism, because they do come into each of our schools at the beginning of the school year, and all of the law students at all of the law schools in Illinois, and I do believe we are on the cutting edge with respect to states that do this. All of our students do an oath of professionalism. So all of our students are beginning their legal career thinking about that golden ticket that they will have when they graduate. The golden ticket only works if you pay it forward. It does no good to serve yourself. We're only as strong as our weakest link. So I won't take up any more time, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you, Northwestern Pritzker, for hosting, and thank you all.
Really wonderful. We are a great panel. We are on time, but we started late. So I'm going to ask a second question and make it a lightning round. And we're going to talk about one, at most, 2 examples, okay? 2 examples from your law school of innovation, community impact, service to the profession. Got it? Lightning round. Dean Rosata Pereira.
Okay, two examples. And I'm not going to take clinical examples because I think clinics are something we all do, but a few ways that we try to scale up a little bit and expand access to justice. The first is our Immigration and Asylum Clinic has what's called a technical assistance project that actually works with 30 community-based organizations to expand the representation in immigration and asylum across Northern Illinois. The second is called NLAP, and it is embedded in the South Loop that we're rebooting, includes students and faculty and alumni, and they are doing things like expungement and getting IDs for the unhoused to be able to begin their lives anew.
Outstanding. Dean Ozofsky.
All right, so I also want to highlight I'm going to highlight something from our clinical space, right? So as I said, our clinics have been involved in all sorts of different access to justice, but in particular, I want to highlight both the work that our Children and Family Justice Centers played in doing a study, a multi-year interdisciplinary study showing that public defense in Illinois is in a state of crisis, and it's involved in really important advocacy work around that, as well as our Siegel Clinic for Immigrant Youth and Families and the work it's been doing around migrants and some of the pop-ups there. But the second example I want to give is one around technology, because I think it's important for us to highlight that work as well. And in particular, our innovation lab, which is led by Professor Dan Luna and CS Professor Chris Hammond, has been working on two projects with the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. So in one, they worked on improving LCBH's chatbot reintervention, which helps tenants with a variety of problems with landlords. And they worked on improving reintervention's ability to identify legal issues and natural language explanations of problems, inputs by tenants, and also worked on a help desk. And so I think there's opportunities in the clinical space. We all could give a bunch more examples, but those are my two.
It's fantastic and more promising than the lawyer who went into court with some chat GPT responses and totally made up cases. So this is the way to do it. So Dean Davidson.
Thank you so much. Two things that I would like to highlight. The first is our students are engaged in building the pipeline of future attorneys. There's so many people who don't know what attorneys do. There's so many young people who don't believe that it's something that they can do. So we are actively involved in the high schools and the elementary schools. And I think it's on us as law schools, as service providers, to begin to build that pipeline with students as early as 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. So excited about that. The other example is our medical legal partnerships. Our law students, first-year law students, and our first-year medical students and first-year PA students come together and work on projects. With our veterans, our projects allow the first-year law students to work on the legal side, allow the first-year medical students to review the medical side, and so from the very beginning, gives the opportunity for students to have that holistic look that Professor Alexandra, Dean Alexandra talked about from the very beginning of law school.
Fantastic. Dean Miles.
Thank you. I will mention it's two things. One, a clinical related, and this is a tough call because Chicago has a rich set of clinics, and so I'm going to pick one and mention one, make one friend and make a lot of enemies. I'm not mentioning everyone. And that is that our housing clinic has a long-standing partnership with Legal Aid Chicago in representing tenants, and it's such a great relationship for us, important legal representation, and a great educational experience for our students. So we're very proud of that. The other thing that I will mention is not clinical related, and that is that we have had for several years what we call a pro bono challenge for our students, and that's a challenge that the students do at least 50 hours of pro bono legal service before they graduate. I think they do that over 3 years. That's not a lot of time. But I've been really impressed by our students and the uptake on this, and it means that in recent years, our graduating class has given over 15,000 hours of pro bono legal service, which means that not only does every one of them meet the pledge on average, but they exceed it by 50%. And so it's really something that I think we do to try to impart the importance of pro bono legal service, no matter where people go in their careers.
Fantastic. Dean Kruk.
So the first thing I want to mention is Chicago Kent's Public Interest Center, which has as its mission increasing pro bono and community service among our students, and overall expanding access to justice in the community. And just a couple of things they do. Currently, there is a group of Chicago-Kent students that participate in a program with Legal Aid Chicago in the Austin community in the west side of Chicago, and they assist people with family law, criminal record, expungement, housing issues, and so forth. And the Public Interest Center, along with our Immigration Law Society, in collaboration with the Children's Legal Center, host asylum or temporary protected status clinics that serves over 70 migrant, that has been serving over 70 migrant families. The second thing I want to mention is Chicago-Kent's Self-Help Resource Center, where each week at the Daly Center, about 25 Chicago-Kent law students volunteer to help pro se litigants with access vital information in order to file their case with the Cook County Circuit Court, and basically help them navigate through the court system. And this has been an ongoing student-led Chicago-Kent project since, I think, 2004, though with a little bit of a disruption during COVID.
Great. Dean Booth.
Last but not least, this is a tough call. This is probably one of the hardest questions to try to narrow it down to two, because all of our institutions, I know at UIC, we have a rich plethora of clinics doing all kinds of things, veterans and international human rights. And so I'll mention two, one because I think they deserve respect for their longevity, and the second one because it's not what you normally think about when you think initially about access to justice. So the first one that deserves some recognition is our Fair Housing Clinic. Just celebrated its 30th year. It's one of the longest housing clinics that we know of, and very involved with HUD, and the students have really great exposure to do all types of housing defense. So that one definitely deserves some recognition. And the other one, you know, marginalized communities historically have been very innovative and have not gotten credit for their innovations. So we have a patent and trademark clinic that is specifically focused on helping low-income and small business owners who have patents that need to be protected or defended, prosecuted against. So those are the two that I'll highlight out of all the great ones. I hope I didn't make any enemies at my own school, because there's so much great work going on in the institution.
Well done. Dean Alexandra, take it home.
Okay, so very hard, but I do want to lift up the fact that our mission at Loyola Law Chicago is to train ethical advocates who will dismantle systems of oppression like racism and other systems of oppression. So in light of that, like many of our colleagues, we have amazing clinics and amazing initiatives, but two of them that capture some of this, one is our Kurt and Linda Roden Center for Social Justice. The reason I want to highlight this is that our Center for Social Justice brings together doctrinal faculty, staff members, clinicians, and students. And through that, they work on projects that are centered around public service initiatives in Chicago. They also place students in summer employment to get them trained in public service so that they will have a career. What we are finding is that public service, even if the students want it, they cannot access it because we don't have an intergenerational training pipeline, and that center is doing that. And also we are dismantling the myth that only certain faculty or certain people at a law school does public service, because doctrinal faculty are as engaged and as committed because of the mission to it. Second, we have, through our Child Law Center, which just celebrated its 30th anniversary as well, we have an educational law and policy clinic. And that clinic trains students and brings them to the Chicago school system to fight bullying and to represent them in IDEA kind of cases. And that clinic runs year-long, and the best service that you can give to students is that exposure to these kind of really hard areas of law so that they can go and then they become legislators. And our students also go to the legislators, to the legislature in Springfield to fight for the rights of children. So I hope I did it
Awesome.
fast
That's
enough.
awesome. So I just have to say, law schools are a place of great hope because this is, next generation, at least my perception, is they are devoted to actually trying to make a difference and to remedy some of the problems that some of us older people have left in their wake. And every law school, all the ones represented here, are not only training up and inspiring new generations, they're also providing service every single day and also innovating and doing research. I'm still looking for the collective noun. You know, it's a pride of lions. I think it's a thrill of deans. A thrill of deans. So please join me in thanking the law school deans.